And, I have Steppin with Marcus J. Live from the Den Legacy and Radio. Thank y'all for continuing to listen to us as we go through the show tonight, talking about the NWA movie Straight Outta Compton. Of course, the movie came out this weekend and is the highest grossing August R-rated movie of all time at $56 million. And hey, I saw the movie. I already kind of told y'all how I feel about it. I'll continue to share my thoughts on the movie as well as NWA's legacy with our next guest. Of course, you've heard him on this show from time to time. You hear him typically from 1 to 4 Eastern on Blackonomics on the Empowerment Radio Network. And you also hear him on Black Talk Radio Network on the Tando Radio Show from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. all times Eastern, Black Talk Radio. He's our brother. Y'all hear him on this show from time to time. He was a member of the LAPD in the early 90s, so he is in a unique position to be able to share his opinion. We got our brother Dave in LA. David Wren is on the live line with us. What's going on, brother?
Marcus J, what's happening, bro? Always feel at home, and glad to be back on with you and your listeners as always. Our feelings and our connections is more than just comrades, in this whole business, but actually, brother, we are brothers. And my feelings for you are very, very. You're one of the people that I call for advice, and I call to look to if I have some question or just wondering about something because of the great advice that you get and the great counseling that you get. So I really do appreciate you, Marcus J, for all that you do and who you are to me personally as we grow in our relationship. It's been nothing but blessings, nothing but blessings.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. As you know, the feelings are mutual. I usually, when we talk sometimes I get a little bit excited, a little bit animated. And as the older brother that you are, you occasionally have to kind of talk me down a little bit. But I think the kind of relationship that we have, I think is definitely well serves both of us. And as you seek guidance from me, I certainly seek it from you as well. And I did get a huge kick out of listening to you on the radio today on the Empowerment Radio Network, as I do from time to time. As usual, you were dropping knowledge, so I appreciated an opportunity to listen to you there, and I appreciate you joining us here. And I know you'll say, "Oh, of course, brother," but I still have to humbly thank you for taking the time. And I know you're gonna, do great things continuing on the 2 shows that you're on. So I appreciate that.
For sure.
What I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, Dave in L.A. Dave in L.A. means, guess what? You live in L.A. So for them to have a movie called Straight Outta Compton, I think, I didn't want to do a show about this movie, about this group, the world's most famous group, without speaking to someone who is able to kind of speak firsthand because you're there. So there's a bunch of angles that I want to take with you tonight, and I know we've got kind of a free reign on time, so I'm glad to hear that. But there's a few things I want to get to. I'm going to start and probably end with this first question, and that is, did you see the movie?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. So you saw the movie.
I saw it Saturday.
You saw the movie Saturday. Now, as someone who, like me, and like Tony, who we spoke to earlier, you not only saw the movie, but you also lived through the movie when a lot of those things that we saw depicted on the screen were going on, actually happening in real life. Some I'm sure were fictional, but a lot of it was real deal. What's your thoughts on the movie? Just speaking as a movie before we get into actually breaking it down.
Well, it's so important that we have. I'm not a real big movie buff, Marcus J, because sometimes we can fall into a daydream state when we watch a movie. I'm more of a person that likes to read because that sparks where you yourself start to think instead of someone else thinking for you. But as a movie, I love the movie, and because there were points in the movie that I can identify with firsthand from many experiences, from being a police officer, actually from being I was actually Tupac's bodyguard on his last live performance of his life at the House of Blues. So I spent time around Pac, I spent time around Suge because Suge was there that evening. So it was very key for me because it was a very pointed time in history in my life in so many ways, and also as being a police officer in Los Angeles in the Watts area. That's where I started off. That's where I did my probation in the division called Southeast, which covers the Watts area of Los Angeles, and next door to it is Compton.
Right.
So, my overall feeling of it, it brought back great memories because, we were actually participants in that. And I was there during the riots in Los Angeles as a probationary officer down in Watts. Right. During the very time of the riot. So it was bittersweet, glad that it was memorialized in a way where it's more relevant for us to start to memorialize our events in our history. And I think it really sets up the precedence for more relative and relevant films to be documented by us for us. Because that's very important. Winston Churchill said that history will be kind to England because England will write it. We need to write our history, and the thing that we need to do, instead of writing it just on pieces of paper, we need to write it in stone, in the stone of our heart, so that it can never be taken away, and that needs to be pushed on by us.
Right. One of the biggest things that I wanted to ask you, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to make sure that I didn't do this show unless I had you participating, because I knew that you were a member of the LAPD. A little bit after Police song came out, and then Part 2 came out, but obviously that song is what it is. You were in LA when the song came out, and you certainly were in LA while it was on the street, and then of course later on in the riots. I want to talk to you about the riots in a minute because I had a very pointed question I'm going to ask you about that directly. But when you heard that song, and then you ended up joining the police academy a little while after that, and then when you hear the song as a police officer, tell me about your feelings when you hear that, when a song like that comes on. Does it make you feel upset? I mean, does it affect you in any way as a black cop or not?
If you're a police officer and that offends you, you shouldn't be a police officer, because the key to this is that, everyone has the freedom of speech. And really, the most important thing as a police officer, should be a peace officer, is that you should have reverence for the law. And in having that reverence for the law, it's a matter of, it's not about you personally, it's about you making sure that the citizens that have entrusted you to serve them, that you're doing just that, even to the means of it being dangerous. I hate when people say that a police officer's job is dangerous and they want to go home. They knew that the day that they started. So we shouldn't give them that excuse. If they can't handle that, then don't do it. Right. Then don't do it. So when I hear, F the police, it is actually executing the rights that those police officers and peace officers are there to uphold. So you want the rights of the general public to be upheld. You do not want a case where the people are afraid of the government, because then you have tyranny. You want it where the government is afraid of the people. Then you have peace, and you have freedom.
Right, right. Speaking of police, when I went to see the movie this weekend, I went in with the knowledge that the makers of the movie had offered the various theaters across the country extra security at their theaters in the event that something popped off. I had my feelings about that, and when I actually went to the theater, because I knew what theater I was going to, to be honest with you, I went in naively thinking they ain't gonna be there. And when I saw them, I had my feelings about that. Tell me your feelings about that when you see or when you hear. I don't know if they were there at your theater. First, tell me, did you see them at your theater? 1, and 2, what's your thoughts on police being beefed up, the security being beefed up at the premieres for Straight Outta Compton?
It was funny because I was in Dallas at the time and I was working. And when you get preoccupied by your what your daily agenda is and your obligations, you really don't pick up on some things. But first thing that I picked up on when I arrived and I saw the movie in Dallas with David Anderson and I looked and I noticed the police presence from the Dallas Police Department. And, of course, I knew why. And, you know, see, this is what happens is that we have to understand what is really going on. There are a lot of instances where people are being provoked to do things. And this is a very, they're provoking the actual thing that they're trying to prevent. And they try to say that is by a presence and everything else. Well, see, they can say that, but the crime is everywhere, right? But there is no double standards when it's in an affluent, neighborhood, when it's a gangster movie.
Right.
You know, think of Scarface. Did they have extra security for Scarface in the hood or in the affluent areas where people have systematically killed people also through organized crime? What's the difference between the organized crime of white people to so-called organized crime of black people?
Here was the point.
The difference is because the stereotype is what allows the system to stay in place to be able to tax everyone. And so this is something that has to be broken because it's a facade of justice. It's a double standard. And this is the real problem. You know, you will always see that there is a double standard where there is a different form of policing. It's a Cinderella effect. They police in the hood different than they police in affluent areas. In the affluent areas, they make sure that they adhere to people's rights, and then in the non-affluent areas, they make sure they violate people's rights. The real problem is not the individual police officers, it's actually the policy of the government. But they have it, and they trick us by making us think it's the individual that wears that uniform. No, it's the policies written for that uniform. Right. That's the real problem.
Right. I tell you, when I saw them, you know, I definitely had my feelings about them because I understand what you said, and I agree with what you said. And, you know, I had this debate with someone a couple of days ago when we were talking about similarly what you were saying as far as how you don't see it, a gangster movie. But even if you wanted to remain consistent, you know, you can send them to more Batman movies because James Holmes shot up Batman, or that train wreck movie because the guy in Tennessee went in there and did that. But, you know, my point was there isn't any recent precedent that would suggest that black people are going to the movie theaters to shoot it up. That's just not something that we do. And so when I saw the guy, I'll be honest with you, when I saw a police officer, it struck me, you know, and not only did it strike me, it insulted me. It was absolutely insulting to see him there. You know, and it was no disrespect to him as an individual. He was sent there by whoever he reports to, you know, but it was absolutely insulting. And when I saw him, I definitely, you know, felt how I felt. And, you know, I have Steppin with Marcus J. live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. Let me just ask you a fun question, Dave. When NWA first came out, 86, 87, 88, were you a fan? Did you dig them?
Oh, come on. How couldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, it was a pivotal time in hip hop, and it was a time in which, you know, the climate of the riots was being set. Now, I'm saying that for this reason. NWA had the group. Had the message of the group had already been spoken about in so many different cities throughout. Every hip hop group was NWA. Every hip hop song, everything spoke of the same things that NWA actually did. The only difference is that the system was ready to bring NWA to the forefront because there was a definite plan that they had for the music and they had for the direction of the music. And I think that, you know, if you look at Africa Bambaataa, if you look at Run DMC, if you look at, all of the old school X-Clan. X-Clan was NWA because the system looked at every single one of us first as the ends.
Right.
And anytime that we speak out against the injustice, we have an attitude.
Right.
So I would ask you, why wouldn't you be, and why wouldn't you want to be NWA?
Right.
Because this is how the system and the paradigm in which we lived in. And we cannot allow them to manipulate the agenda. We have to set the agenda.
It's funny that you say it, and you say it that way, because, in social media the last few weeks, I've publicly stated that I'm the angry black man because I'm a black man and I'm angry. And I don't think that that should be something that we're afraid of. I don't think that that's something that we should cower, because of. We don't speak to our anger because of the fear of what, maybe somebody that's not black may feel about you. You have a right to be angry if you feel that you need to be angry. And there's no reason that you need to run or hide from that. And so, when you put it out there like that, I mean, again, I 100% agree with you on that. Let's kind of go back to the movie for a second, because me personally, I was a huge fan of NWA. I had mentioned Tony when we were talking earlier. You got this 14-year-old kid in Jersey City, New Jersey in 1988 who was the little guy with the loud mouth, just like Eazy-E was. And you got me rocking a LA Kings hat in Jersey City. I didn't know why I was rocking the LA Kings. I didn't know they played hockey. And if I'd have known that, I probably would have still done it. But I tell you, I didn't know that the Kings were hockey. But I mean, I saw myself in Eric Wright. He was my guy, basically because of his his Napoleonic complex, which I shared with him. But my favorite member of the group was always MC Wren. He was always my favorite. Did you have a favorite, and did you see the portrayal of your favorite come out and be accurate in the movie when you watched it this weekend?
Of course, my favorite was MC Wren too.
Shocker.
Because MC Wren's lyrics and message was the most pointed of the group, I thought. And that was one of the things that I was disappointed in the movie, was that it didn't highlight it highlighted the more of the commercial personality, and which always happens. And Margaret, I think that it goes along like with your last question, is that the thing with that is that why wouldn't we have a bad attitude towards everything that's going on? Who likes injustice? Who likes real domestic violence being portrayed and perpetuated against them? So that's what we really had. So MC Wren was my favorite. Because I thought that his message was much more pointed than anyone else.
Not only was his message much more pointed, but when you and now, for those folks who don't know NWA's catalog like Dave and I do, just kind of bear with us for a minute. But particularly early on, Dre didn't do a lot of rapping. He didn't start rapping really until Ice Cube left the group, and he had to step into that role. But if you really listen to that first record and some of the later ones, Wren was always my favorite because, he was angry, he was pissed, but it was a slow burn with him. Like, you can hear Ice Cube's anger in his voice. You can hear it. It's like when he would spit his rhymes, he was literally shouting into the mic, and you can feel it and you can see it. He had a natural scowl on his face, and was Ice Cube. And of course, there's certainly a place for that, and I love Cube. But with Wren, it wasn't really like that. With Wren, his cadence was a little bit slower, and the look on his face was a little bit more serious instead of angry, but just serious. And so when he would spit his rhymes, you knew that you had an angry N-word with an attitude, but he was plotting and methodical. And to me, that's a lot more scary than the dude that's coming at you with the scowl on his face. So that's the reason why, me personally, I always found him to be my favorite. And I was also disappointed because they weren't he and Yellow, of course, weren't highlighted quite as much in the movie as Wren and excuse me, as Cube and Dre and Easy were. But you know, I guess we understand Hollywood and why that was the way it was. Let's talk about the LA riots, because we remember that scene in the movie, Dave, when they actually saw it unfolding, and they weren't a group anymore. This was in 1992, so you kind of got their feelings on it individually, and you saw how they were all very disappointed to the point where, you know, they even became a bit emotional. You were there. You were on the grounds. We all saw what happened to Rodney King, but we were in other parts of the country. You were there. You were on the ground. Tell us what it was really like to be on the grounds during an actual riot where people were burning down your town, where you lived and where you worked.
Well, it was twofold for me, because it was me as a black man, and me as a black man that happens to have a job as a peace officer, as a police officer, within the geographical area of Watts. And it was very, in so many ways, it was very archaic and chaos, but it was very directed. And I found that very disturbing at how directed it was. I was happy to see the actual people taking back their existence, and there was a lot of things that were going on that was not reported, like the truce between, you know, the individuals, the young men, the brothers and sisters that happened to been forced into gangs economically. There was an economic pushing and an economical setup for them to do that, and they fell victim of the setup for so many, you know, in different reasons and by different means. But what they didn't tell you is how the truce parties, how they prevented a lot of the rioting from continuing after the initial outburst. And there were probably a lot of provocateurs that initiated things, because let me tell you something, they had ramped up the emotions of people so much that all it needed was the right ignition and it would go off. But what they don't realize is that LA quickly turned to a very quiet, peaceful city after. But the initial first day and first evening was completely chaotic, because people can go from civilized to feral very quickly. And that's exactly what happened, because the economic conditions was right, the music was right, the propaganda was right, the agenda was right, and the actual decision makers wanted that exact same thing to happen, because you can look at what came out of the LA riots is what you saw in Ferguson, is what you saw in Baltimore recently, and what you will see in the next events that will happen. You will see the militarization of the police departments in LA was the excuse and that was used, and they had plausible deniability, because that's what was the overall agenda, was to militarize the overall civilian police department, to get rid of posse comitatus and to actually get where the everyday person is no longer a citizen but a subject of the government, and they did it by means of economic destruction and riots, and LA was the clearest example.
Now, it's funny that you say that and you talk about the provocateurs, because as I'm sitting there listening to you talk, man, that was 1992. I mean, we got a lot of listeners that either weren't born or were very young in 1992. And so, you know, you're speaking to Dave in LA, our brother, who's joining us here on Aint on Half Step on Marcus J, who's giving it to you as a person who was actually there. And of course, yours truly. I was 17 years old on my way to finishing high school, on my way to college in 1992 when this was going on. And it was one of the things that has been burned into my memory. I'll never, ever, ever forget turning on the television and seeing a major U.S. city burning to the ground. And I never had that feeling again until 9 years later when I watched what went on with 9/11, which, I have opinions about that, which we can debate that another time. But those two events, were very pivotal in my development. And when I hear you say something like provocateurs, it reminds me of what happened last week in Ferguson, Missouri, when they had the 1-year anniversary of the murder of Michael Brown by former police officer Darren Wilson, who was not charged. So I guess I should say murder, but it is what it is. That's how I feel. That's what I'm going to say. But they were some very clear provocateurs there who were walking the streets talking about they were protecting the press. I can't think of their names because I didn't expect to bring this up, so I didn't properly research that, Dave. But
probably was the Oath Keepers.
That's exactly what. Thank you. Of course, I knew you would know. I knew you would know. The Oath Keepers. We talk about provocateurs. Think about what you look like as a white person who is not in a uniform. First of all, uniform is bad enough because of the tension between the police and the people who are protesting. But you're a non-police officer, white person walking through the black neighborhoods of Ferguson, Missouri, talking about you there to protect the press. How is that not a provocateur? And how am I a race baiter by even merely suggesting that, Dave? Help me understand that. My guess is you're going to probably agree with me, but if you're not, please tell the listeners why you don't.
No, you're absolutely right, Marcus. And the thing about the one of the things that we really need to talk about with the LA riots and a lot of the incidents, what happens is that there is no good crisis that's gone to waste. There was a crisis that was established by the overall program. And so the Rodney King incident became the catalyst to exploit that incident and to push an agenda. So a lot of us, when the LA riots happened, so many of us knew it was coming but didn't prepare for it, so we didn't know what to do when it hit. And I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the general public at hand. But those that prepared for it because they knew it was coming were able to see the strategical moving of the agenda to make sure that it serviced the need and the objective through the different methods that the agenda would have. And so when you have the Oath Keepers so-called protecting the press, as if they would need protection, is because it's sending a message that everywhere that black people are, one, they're angry, they have really no reason to be upset at the overall agenda. They should just be happy that they're an American. And that just sends the message that if anyone does not participate in our system the way that we've designed it, which is exclusively separate and not equal, then they're a problem and it's not the overall system. They propagandize to give you all sorts of propaganda to think that it's just this individual. Every black person is a criminal. Every black person is mad and angry. Yes, every black person that I know hates discrimination, and they hate the double standard and the disparity of treatment, to the point where people that are really want freedom will not walk among the slaves. I will not walk with those that are willing to compromise their morality for someone else's agenda. So you can call me whatever you want. I'm not your soldier. I'm a warrior, and a soldier can never do what a warrior thinks. So, Marcus, you're spot on this, and we need to call it as it is because this is going to continue as long as we allow it. I don't think anyone should come into our community that isn't invited into our community. The only way that you can do that is we start to own our community outright and exclusively.
When you make that point, Dave, it reminds me of something that I heard you say recently when you were on Blackonomics on the Empowerment Radio Network. You had this phrase that you used multiple times when you mentioned about a magician and what a magician is trying to do versus what he actually does do. Why don't you share what you mean and how that correlates to the point that you just made?
the key to magic is not to trick you, but to make you believe. And that's how this works out in this case with NWA having really a movie documentary. You know, it's really a cinema documentary about a time and period. And some brothers from Compton, you know, that had made it in the industry and were very influential in the industry. See, the key to this whole magic is this. The key to magic is not to trick you, but to make you believe. They don't want to trick you into anything, because when you trick someone into anything, they don't even realize that they've just fallen, or they don't realize that they've just been had. What they want you to do, what is more beneficial, is to get you to believe something. And when you believe something, what do? You put your full energy, your full will, all of your, you know, you put your talents behind it. You don't want to squander it. And this is the thing that they want you to believe. They want you to believe that you live in a society that includes you, and they want you to believe that there is something called the American dream. They want you to believe that you can participate by voting in a system that you can be partial to, and it could be, you can hold the system accountable to you, which you can't do. That's the magic trick, is they want you to believe that Barack Obama was put in the position because it was time for a black man to be president, and that it was a monumental and a milestone for this country. That is what they wanted you to believe. That's the magic trick. They want you to believe that the civil rights was the best thing for you, when in actuality it was a doctrine of enslavement of everyone. See, that's the trick. That's not the trick, but that's what they want you to believe. And this whole thing with NWA and the riots from LA is they want you to believe that you can say no justice, no peace. And they want you to believe that that will get you to justice and peace. But what it will actually get you is in front of their strength, where they can crush you, so that you will not pay attention to what can really bring about justice and peace. And it's by you not participating in the system that they've created. If you play by their rules, they will rule. And until we understand that and have an asymmetrical approach to this, we will continue to march, we will continue to petition Congress, the president, these facade of leaders and these celebrity figureheads who have no power, but because we see them on TV, they have a bunch of people, you know, they have an entourage with guns, and it's all funded fully, and it looks good. See, that makes us believe that that's where the power is, and that's where we should actually be expending our resources trying to chase. We are nothing more than a hamster on a wheel running around and not getting anywhere. We're staying in the same place. Only thing that we're doing is expending all of our energy. So this is the key to magic, is not to trick you, but to make you believe. What will really bring about freedom for us? If we decide to move away from the system and devise a system that works for us. And the only way that you can do that is if you control real resources, not their cash, cream. Think about cream. Cash rules everything around me. That means that cash rules you. And who creates cash? Wasn't created by God Almighty. It's created by another man to manipulate and enslave you. If you have resources, then the economy needs you. You don't need the economy. So this is the key thing, and that's one of the things I wanted to express with your question, Mark.
No, I can dig it. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. And that's the reason why I asked it the way that I asked it, because when I heard you say it, it kind of caught me, and I said, man, I like that. I like that analogy, because it forces you to think beyond just going into analyzing words. You got to analyze the thought behind those words. And, everybody can relate to, to magicians and magic, and what the magician is trying to do. But when you think of it the way that you laid it out, it forces you to actually think. And that's what we try to do here on Ain't No Half Step on Marcus J on Legacy Internet Radio. That's what we try to do on Blackonomics on the Empowerment Radio Network, and that's what we try to do on Tando Radio Show on Black Talk Radio Network. So that's what we're here to do. Ain't no Steppin, Marcus J, live from the Den Legacy Internet Radio. Special thank you to those folks that are listening to the replays right now on YouTube, as well as those folks that are listening to us live on TuneIn. You're listening to your man Marcus J and our brother Dave in LA. We're talking about NWA and their overall impact, the movie, their social impact, and all of that kind of stuff. Which brings me to my last question, Dave. The legacy of NWA. Tell me, when you think of NWA and their position in the world, and here's why I'm going to ask you that question, because I guess I'll start off what my opinion is, and then I'll have you kind of follow me up here. When I think of, just if we're going to talk about the principles of the movie, we know Wren and Yella were important pieces to NWA, but if we're going to just speak specifically to the principles, that being Ice Cube, Eazy-E, and Dr. Dre, they took completely different paths, and their legacies are completely different. Now, we know that we lost Eazy-E in March of 1995 to AIDS, and that's documented. Of course, if you know the history, you know that. You saw the movie, you know that. We're not spoiling anything by telling you that. But Eazy-E was one of the first rapper / hip hop artist to own his own record label. Now, you can make the argument that he got it through, unmentionable means, translation, drug money. We can talk about that, but that ain't what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the fact that he was one of the first to own his own record label. That should be something that we pay attention to, and that should be commended, because there are a lot of people that follow. Of course, we know about Def Jam and all that kind of stuff before that, but just saying, in that way that he did it, he was one of the first, not the first. So that's easy. That's Eazy-E. And then we look at Dr. Dre, when we know he left Ruthless Records, and he did pretty much the same thing with regards to starting Death Row and later on Aftermath. But his legacy has become just outrageous, being the first hip-hop billionaire because of the business deals that he made outside of hip-hop, created by the connections that he had made inside of hip-hop. And so when you look at Andre Young, he's so much bigger than just a rapper. Anybody who's ever made a rap record in the last 30 years, they want a Dre beat. They just want a Dre beat. Now, whether they got one or not, that remains the question. But they wanted a Dre beat, which brings me last, but certainly not least, to O'Shea Ice Cube Jackson, who, when I think of Mama J, and I get a kick out of this, Dave, I think you will as well. She don't know Ice Cube from Straight Outta Compton, NWA. You know who she know? She know the dude from Are We There Yet? Yeah. She knows that guy. And so when we went through the whole thing about what he was before, because she don't even know Craig from Friday. She don't even know that. She don't know Craig from Friday. She don't know Craig, or she don't know Doughboy, or none of that stuff. She knows Are We There Yet? And so Ice Cube was able to reinvent himself from one of the angriest gangster rappers, or reality rappers, whatever you want to call them, that we've ever had, to becoming a household name that has been able to disarm middle white America, similarly to how Will Smith has been able to do it. Because I don't know their portfolios, but my guess is at 140 million, Ice Cube ain't missing no meals, and he ain't missing no bills either. You know what I'm saying? So he's okay, and he ain't okay solely off the backs of wax. He because he was making movies. So that's kind of my interpretation of how hip-hop can be if you find yourself in the right positions. That's their legacy as I see it. What is NWA's legacy as Dave in LA sees it?
Wow. Let me tell you, the brothers have gone on a journey like so many of us in the past. And the thing is that we have to realize that in this journey is much more than us individually, because we can look at the progression of them all individually. But one of the things that we have to focus on is that the individual talents of these brothers has really been misunderstood and misused by an industry for another agenda. And, from Ice Cube is always going to be all right because of his talents and what he was able to do with it. Ice Cube is a businessman, And Dre is business. And those talents have worked well for them, and they did well. But the thing that the legacy part that I think we should really focus on is that we can no longer allow institutions outside of us to bring our talents to the table or to showcase our talents. Because anytime that happens, that's where our true value as a collective people is lost. And with NWA, I would love for NWA to have been able to continue up until now and evolve the group as the individuals have evolved. That would have been so powerful for our young people to see the natural progression of age, because they wouldn't be doing the same thing today in 2015 that they were doing in 88. Those brothers collectively staying together, harnessing their talent, would have done remarkable work if they had owned everything. Because what we were seeing was the talents that were actually being orchestrated and directed by different agendas. And I think it's so important for us to look at our talents as our natural resources that have to be exclusively for us, right, so that we will not be used by someone else. And that's what, the part of the legacy of the greatness of these brothers and their talents that you can see in so many different groups. You can see it in PE.
Right.
You can see it in everybody.
Right.
And this is the thing that we need to focus on. No longer can we squander our talents for someone else's agenda. Right. It has to be exclusively ours. But these brothers are great. They've done great work, and their legacy is locked in so many different arenas, in so many different directions. And now we can really benefit from them to learn something, to do much better. And it wasn't anything that they did. They walked into the system. The thing is that now we need to walk away from the system.
Right. Have Steppin with Marcus J. live from the Den. Legacy Internet Radio. Dave, I know we're running short on time. I'm going to ask you one more time. I didn't expect one more question. I didn't expect to ask you this question, but I just thought about it. There's a question that I asked Miss Tony. We spoke with her earlier on in the show, and it was a feeling that I had. I want your opinion on it. I won't explain mine too much because the listeners already heard me get into it. But the way I'll set this up is to say, as a 41-year-old man in America, I'm not the same 14-year-old kid I was the first time I heard Just Don't Bite It and She Swallowed It and One Less Bitch and some of the other very, very nasty misogynistic songs. How, as Dave, how do you rationalize the grown man Dave versus the young man Dave when you hear those songs again? Because you probably memorized them back then when you was jamming to them, just like I did. Whereas now, as a grown man, we understand how destructive it is, not only to our community, but our individual relationships with the women that we love. How do you rationalize that, you as an individual?
And the most important thing, by the daughters that we have an obligation to father.
Right.
And I know you, Marcus J., and you know me when it comes to our daughters.
Absolutely. That's why I asked you.
And
that's why I asked you.
And that is probably the most important question of it all, because we just talked about NWA would not be doing the same music today that they were doing there because the maturation process.
Right.
The thing that for young people is that we've learned we have to look at these examples, because everyone, God willing, will be young and have the ability to grow into maturity. That's the process. So we were where we were supposed to be at that time. But the thing is that we could have been much better. We could have not wasted. What do we waste in our youth? The youth of our energy itself. And I would say now, looking back, as you said, from the different things that we talked about and what we perpetuated, that was a young man not having any real guidance or counseling to give a projection of what the future is going to be and the responsibility of where we are now.
Right.
The thing that we've always missed, and the thing that we're still missing, is the relationship with our elders to nurture and to help, bring along into maturity our young people. Our young people need to reach out to our elders, and our elders need to make themselves available to our young people. If we really want to have a paradigm where our talents aren't squandered. Because so many times in our youth, with the energy of our youth and our talent, if it's harnessed and harvested correctly, it could be about a bountiful fruit. But instead, what we have is total disruption. We squander our talents, and we do not have a focus for the future that is sustainable. And that's the thing that, is so important that I think we need to do. 47, you're 41. We need to reach out to these young brothers as much as we possibly can to try to nurture them and to seed in them the future. Don't talk to them from where they are. Talk to them from where they're going and what's possible, and try to reach them where they are. And when you reach someone where they are, you go to them. And so I think that is really, really important because, now as a father, it totally changes your life because you stop living for yourself.
Right.
There becomes a responsibility where you're now living for someone else. We need to invest that counsel within our young. We need to stop living for ourselves and start living for them.
I can dig it. Ain't no half stepping. With Marcus J, live from the Den Legacy Internet Radio. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to us tonight on TuneIn Live, Legacy Internet Radio. You've searched it and you've found us. You went to our website, www.legacyinternetradio.com, as well as the hashtag Legacy Internet Radio, one word. We appreciate those folks listening to us right now on on YouTube during our replays and our podcast. Final words, Dave, our brother Dave in LA. Tell us where we can find you. We know about the Empowerment Radio Network, and we also know about Black Talk Radio. I've set it up, but your turn. Tell us who you are and where folks can find you.
David Wren, a.k.a. Dave from LA. You can find me at Blackonomics Monday through Friday, 1 Eastern Standard Time to 4 Eastern Standard Time. On the Pacific Coast time is 10 to 1. You can also find me on Tando Radio Show. That's on Black Talk Radio Network from 3 Pacific Time to 6 Pacific and 6 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. We have a show. And you catch me here with Marcus J from time to time. And Marcus J, you can catch him on both of our shows. Marcus J, we need to get you on Blackonomics, man.
Yeah,
as soon as possible.
Yeah,
because
I haven't done Blackonomics in
it's
been quite a while since I've done Blackonomics. So, yeah.
Well, that needs to change, and we need to do something this week, just to talk about, because you are Blackonomics.
Yes, sir.
And this is so important. And I just want to thank you, brother, for inviting me to come on. And my last words is that we need to continue to support Ain't No Half Steppin', Marcus J and the whole programming that Marcus has, because this is us reaching back, and we need to do more. There is a commitment that we need to have to each other so that there is a collective prudence that we can establish and direct our own future together. And this is one of the mediums in which to do it. The propaganda has to be exterminated, and the truth has to stand on its own, and you're only going to get that from people that have a vested interest, a sincere vested interest in your overall progression. And this is what Marcus J has, and this is why I fully support, and we need to continue to support each other, Marcus J.
Well, I appreciate it, Dave. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your wisdom and your guidance and your brotherhood. Thank you for your kind words. We're going to move into our final break of the night. Dave, hold the line. We're going to take our final break of the night. And when we come back, we're going to have our rants, and we're going to have our closings, and we're going to have our missing child. Marcus J and my brother Dave in L.A. Ain't No Half Step on Marcus J, live from the Den Legacy Internet Radio. Be back in a few minutes.